For our YouTube viewers, a different setup of the Pope household here, and that is because I wanted to showcase the Farwell for Hire shirt just a little more, as this will be our final podcast recording in the month of May. So we started off with the same way we've started off every podcast in the month of May. Hey, Farwell, what'd you do today?
First of all, I didn't look as good as you, my friend. That's what I didn't do today. Look that good.
It's the setup. It's because your face is on my shirt. That's why you're saying that.
Kind of. Yeah. If I may be so vain as to put it that way, absolutely. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, Poper, because there is no BS in this fundraising campaign. This goofy idea that came to me in 2014, hey, what if I offered to do something for somebody in exchange for a donation to cystic fibrosis? It's legit. I do the things that people ask to have done, like mow grass, like weed gardens, like paint houses, like dismantle sheds, like you name it. I have done it. And there are times where the work is as legit as it sounds. Like this past weekend, we had a scorcher of a heat wave for the long weekend, and it's the perfect weekend to enjoy some wobbly pops with your friends. And here in Ontario, you could have 4 of those friends in your backyard. It was all great. And I was busting my ass, pardon my French, but full on busting it. Today, my friend, the furthest thing from. Let me tell you about...
Let me guess, you delivered a mattress, you went to a house sale, and you spoke.
1 out of 3 ain't
Okay.
bad. I've already delivered the mattress. I've done a few of the house sales because David Schooley, who's with Remax here in the region of Waterloo, is donating $1,000 to our campaign for every house he sells. I've been to 5 of those. Can't wait to cash that big check. But today I did speak. That was the end of my day. It started in Cambridge. So after I finished my talk show on 570 News, I booted down to Cambridge to a company called DDS, Automated Machinery Design. I had never heard of them before. And this is a company under 30 employees, so a small business, that has every year gathered toys for our annual toy drive through the radio station. Well, because of COVID, the Salvation Army, which collects the toys, couldn't do it this past year. But this company still collected toys and dropped off on their own. Salvation Army was thrilled. And the company gets this idea, we want to do more. We want to be more involved in our community. So somehow, some way, they got wind of our campaign. They sent an email and explained this, did the toy drive, want to do more in the community. We're looking for that thing, and we've decided Farwell for Hire is that thing. The email says, we don't really have a token job for you to do around our plant, so we're just going to write you a check for $5,000. Will you come and pick it up?
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's what I did today after
Easy
work.
job.
Drove to Cambridge, picked up a $5,000 check from DDS, Automated Machinery Design. Darren McCready, the GM over there. Great guy, great team. I got to meet, collected $5,000. Then it was off to the University of Waterloo. And what we usually do there annually is have a golf tournament out at Westmount. Remember those golf tournaments we used to be able to have?
Yeah, I do.
Golf games. So it's an annual fundraiser for...
I was out yesterday.
Of course. Well, we're allowed now. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
The annual fundraiser for student athletes at the University of Waterloo raised more than $1 million over its first 19 years. And of course, we couldn't be on the golf course, so we did something. I keep saying it's the university, and they have me MC their event every year. I don't play golf because I'm terrible at it, but I go, I eat dinner, I talk. They did it virtually this year. They asked if I could help MC the virtual event. So I went, I got to be on location, which was neat. I got to go inside a building. It's a massive building, the Physical Activities Complex at the University of Waterloo. But anyway, I talked. I helped do this panel discussion, had a great time, learned a bunch, and they cut me a check and I came home. So go collect a check, go talk and collect a check. That was my day, my friend.
In my history with you, I can say that I believe there is only 2 people in this world that like to talk as much as you, and that is Sherry Basson and Greg Brady.
Yes, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It seems like a pretty easy day for you.
I'll consider myself in good company with those 2. So that's why I'm repping the black and gold UW Warriors golf shirt today for those of you watching on YouTube. And if you're not, I'm wearing a golf shirt from the University of Waterloo Warriors. Go black, go gold.
Of course, you can find us on YouTube at OHL Stories with Farwell and Pope. Just type in OHL Stories. It pops up. Every episode we've done so far is up there, I believe. So go and take a look. And you can always follow us on Twitter at Farwell_OHL, and myself at _Chris Pope. And finally, Mike, as the month trails to an end, one last touch on Farwell for Hire. If people are seeing this shirt and they're hearing this story, we're a couple minutes into the podcast. It is wrapping up soon, but there's a huge 50-50 available, and you don't have to be in person or even from KW to get your tickets and be a part of it. How do they find it?
It's like you read my mind, because we're talking to a bunch of junior hockey fans. We've seen the 50-50 draws in rinks. You and I buy all the time. We never win, but we are going to encourage you to win this one. If you go to Rangers5050.com, that's the Kitchener Rangers nonprofit charitable arm that manages all of the stuff that they do in the community. Rangers Reach is the backbone behind this because they have the licenses and stuff. So go to Rangers5050.com, buy yourself a ticket. The number you're going to see when you go to Rangers5050.com is about $46,000 as we record this. Huge. That's your share. The other 46,000 has already been cut off for cystic fibrosis, and we want to get that jackpot growing. So anywhere in Ontario that you're listening to this right now, or if you're listening somewhere else, but you have a friend in Ontario that can buy the tickets for you, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Rangers5050.com, get a chance at a huge jackpot, and you're helping cystic fibrosis research along the way.
Here's what we'll offer. farwellandpope@gmail.com. If you're listening and you're not from Ontario and you want tickets, shoot us an email. We'll make sure we get someone to get you some tickets, if you know what I mean. I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but we'll figure it out. And if you win, we'll figure out how to wire transfer $46,000
or more, probably more. Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely will be more. And again, that's 46 for you, 46 for Farwell for Hire, which goes towards finding a cure or control for cystic fibrosis. None of the money goes to the Rangers. Just want to point it out.
Yeah, good point, because you don't want to have 19 other OHL cities mad. I'm not giving my money to that stinking blue and red team. No.
Exactly. And I don't blame them. Two Rangers did make the AHL all-rookie team. Did you see that? Adam Maskrin and Riley Damiani, both playing with the Texas Stars. Both were on the same line all year. Sometimes coaching can be so difficult, can it? Listen, and sometimes it can be so easy.
Sometimes
all these two played together in Kitchener and had success together. Why don't we try it again? And lo and behold, it works.
Sometimes you can just keep those blue and red glasses on too, can't you? Because let's not forget Connor McMichael, former London Knight, also named to the AHL All-Rookie team.
Right. I want to point out, Riley was named to the AHL All-Rookie team with Connor. Adam already been in the league. He was named to the All-Division team with Riley. Anyway, just want to point that out.
I'll also point this out. Damiani's too small. He's never going to make it.
Yep.
There you go. Yep.
I never said he was too small. He wasn't going to make it, but many people have.
Yeah, that's why I'm not saying you.
Gotcha.
I'm just that was the book on Damiani when he came into the OHL, and I think it's still the book on Damiani, and Damiani just keeps going like Damiani has been going.
I shot my mouth off in his rookie season about how many goals he'd score throughout his time in the OHL. Lost that bet to you. He heard about it. I keep telling him to prove me wrong. So.
Dumbest bet you made. Did you top out at 20 or 25?
25.
25, yeah. But that's the thing. Like this was
I look like a fool now.
Was it his rookie year or his sophomore? Either way, you said I think it was his second year. And you said in his career he would not reach 25 in a season. I thought,
then it must have been right at the start of the second year, because it was made in the press room at the odd. So I remember the bad ones.
I was happy to take that money. Happy to take it. Yeah.
Some major news out of Flint, Mike.
Popey, listen, it's a little bit too coincidental to not find some fire behind this smoke. So first, it's Barclay Branch, the general manager and the architect of the team that you and I were both really interested to watch down the stretch of the season that came to a crashing end in March of 2020, right? Mm-hmm. The Firebirds, we wanted to see a playoff game in the Dort. The Firebirds were coming around. I mean, everything just seemed to be falling into place. They were certainly competitive, and Barclay Branch, yes, that Branch family, but was the architect of that team. And another key part of it, and you and I have had him on the podcast before, Eric Wellwood, the head coach, who knows a thing or two about winning and knows a thing or two about the Ontario Hockey League and developing talent. And first it's Branch, then it's Wellwood, and you're thinking, what? Oh, the 5-year ban on owner Rolf Nilsson is about to expire. Okay. I mean, I'm sorry, but okay.
Yeah. You brought you brought that to my attention, and I just think where there's smoke, there's fire, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that what there is? Like, I don't want to put it all on Rolf and how much I have no idea about how much input he obviously is still taking with this team, or now that this ban is over, or what he was allowed to do during the ban, whatever. I don't know. I just know the Flint Firebirds just lost 2 great hockey minds. And for a program that has made so many strides over the last 2 to 3 years, 2 years under Eric Wellwood, like he came in there and he was coaching university hockey to get a head coaching job in the Ontario Hockey League after coaching university hockey for not long. And to be honest, I may be wrong, and I'm sorry, Welly, if I am, but I don't even think he was a head coach when he was coaching university hockey. To then get the ball in Flint and to do what he did with that ball, Eric Wellwood should have about 19 other teams calling him in the next 30 minutes, my guess. Like, you just want that guy, whether he's on your bench or as an associate or as like an advisor, whatever job he wants and it is available. I think he's got to be a front runner, doesn't he? He's young, but what he did with that team and all the way the players talked about him and the way the players bought into his system and everything that he did in that organization, he won't be without a job for long.
That's a great point. I don't think he will. And it's interesting you say he's young, but because our guest on this podcast, I'll put it nicely, is not young, but recognizes the direction that the league is moving. And he's going to talk about that when you hear from our guest in this episode coming up in just a few minutes. I know you want to talk about Terry Christensen Poper, but let me just go back to,
I was just going to point out that they had a new president this year too. So there's going to be a whole lot of new faces in Flint. He's familiar with the team, but there's going to be a whole lot of new faces with that organization heading into this year.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. He's a new old president, right? He left the team in 2018, and now he's back as Branch and Wellwood depart. But here's the thing. Look, I don't know Rolf Nilsson at all. I could walk into the Dort Federal Event Center for a game and pass him in the concourse, and I wouldn't know it's him. All I know is what happened the first time around and what led to his 5-year, well, I called it a ban before. We can use a different term like suspension from any hands-on involvement with the team. Whatever the case is, we know it's expiring. I believe in second chances. I really do. I don't think one mistake or one incident defines you as a person. So because I don't know the person at all, okay, if you don't remember the story in Flint, it got so bad, his insistence on his son being played because he was convinced that his son was going to the National Hockey League. And the best way to get his son to the National Hockey League was to buy an Ontario Hockey League franchise and force the coach to play his son. And the team balked, the coaching staff balked. And eventually there was a revolt of sorts from the players who walked into management's office and handed in their sweaters, including Rolf's own son, in solidarity with the players. That's a monster move for a young man. Anyway, it was a mess. The meddling was too much. The league steps in. Now the 5 years is up. I'll grant the man his second chance. I don't know what he's like. I don't know what it's going to be like in Flint, but to your point a moment ago, it's a real shame that they're losing certainly a very good young hockey man in behind the bench. And by all accounts, Barclay Branch was doing himself a whale of a job as well.
Think about the trades Barclay Branch made last year.
There you go.
Like, that was a team that there were plenty of people putting money down on the line, that they were walking their way to the Memorial Cup. Like, there was people picking them to win an OHL championship last year. That's how good they were. And, you don't hear a lot of talk about them because I think just because they're stateside and because they're Flint and they had everything that went on in the early years, they were just trying to get over that hump. And it seemed like they had, and then this happens. It sucks for the team. It sucks for the franchise because you lose a guy like Eric Wellwood and Barclay Branch. On the whole Rolf side, I'm giving him every benefit of the doubt because family was involved before. People do messed up things when family's involved. I get it. I'll give you a break because of what he's done even before and after that. Take a look at that dressing room. The facilities they have, we got a behind the scenes view. It is phenomenal. It is next level, like top of the league, next level. To then put money into the actual arena, redoing all those seats during this COVID process, splashing the money in there without knowing when the next game is going to be played and so on and so forth. I'm giving them every benefit of the doubt. And I hope the Flint Firebirds organization keeps on rolling but you throw in their media relations, play-by-play. I'm sure he has 800 different titles, but Dom leaving too. We've talked about Dom Henning on this podcast before, him leaving too. That's 3 big pieces out of that organization that have left heading into the next season.
Look, let's be honest. You and I are broadcasters for the Kitchener Rangers, so there's going to be a bias and homerism that comes with that, even though we honestly do try to keep it in check. I'm reminded, though, of when I worked alongside Don Cameron, and he'd do pre-game interviews across the hall, as we call it, on our pre-game show on 570 News before Rangers games. And he'd oftentimes, because Don had been around for so long, catch up with players he had known from before or players he'd talked to earlier in their career. And he'd always tell them, have a good game, but not tonight, because of course they were playing against the Rangers. I say that just by way of the bias that might come with it. But you and I, we want to see every team succeed. We were genuinely excited to think about the playoff atmosphere in that arena. It's too bad for the fans in Flint. Hopefully this doesn't change their trajectory. And again, if all 20 teams could win every year, what a fun thing. Well, that wouldn't be much fun, would it? But you get what I mean. We want to see teams succeed when it's their turn in the cycle. And Flint was right there knocking on the door.
I try to remain unbiased as possible. The only reason in the back of my mind that I, if you will, want the Rangers to succeed is because then I work longer.
It comes right down to that. Yeah,
that's it. I get more of a paycheck the longer we work, and I've never been to a Memorial Cup, so I want to do one. Like, that's the only reason. I cheer for 18 other teams in this league too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 18.
I see what you did there. No, I got it.
Yeah.
You did. You didn't have to say it twice.
I know, but some people might not have picked up on it. So
wait a minute, Poper. You mean there's been a team that left the league? Nope, that's not what he meant.
I just want people to realize that I know there are 20 teams in this league. And any listener to this podcast knows I have spoke at length that I think Flint would be the best playoff barn in this league if they got it hopping. That long walk you have to take underneath what seems like the bowels of an arena that was built as a prison, just cement everywhere. It's dark. You got to walk by all this stuff. And the history with the Flint Generals and all of that, I just think that barn, if it's popping and it is full, I couldn't imagine. That would be my favorite rink, I think, other than the Odd. I hope to see it someday, and I hope that they continue on the path that Barclay and Eric have led them down.
So speaking of history, we have a coach with a long history in the Ontario Hockey League joining us on this week's podcast. His most recent history is a championship overseas in a place that you won't believe they're even playing hockey, much less winning championships, but they did under this guy's guidance. I got to know him best during his days in Sarnia. And I will say only this, because his previous OHL experience came just before I came into the league on a regular basis. But this man, the man that I knew, let me just say, that the man we meet on this podcast is far different from the guy I ever met in a rink. And that's not a knock. He was never, unkind to me in any way. He just had a demeanor about him. His game face was on, let's say. And I was younger and newer to the game. And so our encounters were always just that, hi, this, what do you need? Move on with life. I did not know. And I texted somebody whose name comes up a couple of times in this podcast when we were done. And I said, I'd never heard, and I didn't know the man laughed like that. And her response is, oh, he's got the best laugh. And anyway, I'll leave it to you. You always do such a good job of introing these guests, Poper, but this was, that's how I just wanted to, my way of introduction to this guy. This guy that we meet on the podcast is far different than the guy I knew behind the bench when I covered him in Sarnia.
How's Sanaya doing, by the way?
She's great. How could she not be? Good. Right? She's a terrific sports writer, and she's doing sports writing things. And
as you'll hear, she's a good friend of Dave MacQueen, who started his Ontario Hockey League journey as a player under Brian Kilrea for the Ottawa 67s. He tells the story, but he started off as a defenseman. Kilrea said, yeah, no, you're not doing that. Not in my end. You're now a winger. And played 2 seasons in Ottawa before Kilrea had enough of them and shipped him up to Sudbury, which is a little far from his home in Woodstock. Then he came back into the league as a coach in Peterborough after some time in Junior B and Junior C, won an OHL championship with the Peterborough Petes, hosted the Memorial Cup that year as well in Peterborough, goes off to the National League, then back to Erie from Tampa to Erie. Won a championship, though, with the Otters, some brief time in Sarnia, and now, as Mike just alluded to, coming off a championship, which makes him a king in Romania. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave MacQueen.
I thought we'd kind of start right where you anyway, left off, because you're currently finishing your quarantine in Atlantic Canada, having returned from Romania, where you won the Romanian championship. So I know this is OHL Stories, but let's tell the tale, Dave, of how a kid from Woodstock, Ontario ends up coaching for the Romanian championship.
Well, that is a long story. It first started when I left Sarnia. I guess that would be about 10 years ago. And, a friend of mine who you've had on the show, Paul Henry, I ran into him at a game in Mississauga, I believe it was. And going back a little bit, I don't want to jump all over the place, but he started out before he got into psychology as a player agent. And I ran into him, and I hadn't seen Paul for years. My son was playing for Windsor at the time, and I was just going to games. We were actually living in Kitchener at the time, so it was close. I was kind of in the middle of everything. And I said, "Hey, Paul," I said, "you owe me. Like 2 weeks before the NHL draft, in my draft year, you call me and tell me you're getting out of the agent business," and he was going to be my agent. So anyways, long story short, he took it to heart. I was just kidding around with him, and he ended up knowing he was working for Salzburg in Austria at the time. And Salzburg is one of the best teams there. They have a ton of money, and him and Pierre Paget were working there. And he says, "You know what? There's a team, a new team coming into the Austrian league called Dornbirn." I go, "Okay." And he goes, "Why don't you call them?" I go, "Like, call who?" And so he gives me a phone number, and he's been talking to him. And you got to understand, a lot gets lost in translation when you go to Europe, especially when you're dealing with GMs that, aren't really GMs. They're more the financial guys. So I'm talking to this GM / president / finance / everything. And to this day, we're still very good friends. We left on very good terms. And I said, he says, "Well, why do you want to come to Austria?" I said, "Well, I've been thinking of coming to Europe now. I'm kind of done in junior." And he goes, "Well, okay. Send me your resume." So I sent him my resume and everything. And, don't hear anything. Call Paul back 2 weeks later. He comes, he calls me, and he goes, "Okay. I like your resume. It looks good. You got a lot of experience. We're a first-year team," explained everything to me. And I go, "Okay. So what's the process now?" He goes, "Well, I'll get back to you." So I get off the phone, talk to my wife. I said, "It looks like we're going to Austria." About 2 weeks later, I don't hear anything. I said, "Nancy, I don't think we're going to Austria." So anyways, long story short, we ended up going there. I ended up staying there for 7 years because of Paul Henry getting me in contact with this guy. And then we parted on great terms. 7 years. We all know that coaches have a shelf life. So get done in Austria, come home. Kind of a sad story. When I fly in April, almost 2 years ago, find out my mom and dad weren't very healthy. And within 2 weeks, I lost both my parents. So I'm going, well, you know what? It's probably a good thing I don't have a job coming up here in the fall. And then around November, get a call from my agent. He says, Brasov in Romania is looking for a coach. I go, okay. Well, I don't hear anything from my agent for like 3 months. Call him up, saying, like, what happened? He goes, well, they didn't call me. I said, well, aren't you supposed to call them back? So about a week later, agent calls me again, says, yeah, they're making a change. I go, they're making a change. It's like middle of February. He goes, yeah, they're starting the playoffs tomorrow or in 3 days. They're getting rid of their coach, and they're sitting in like third place. And I'm going, okay, whatever. So I, jump on a plane, get over there. Literally had 1 day of practice. We're starting the playoffs. Things don't go well. We lose in game 7 of the first round to a pretty good team. And I figured it was kind of a rehearsal. They were looking for a coach. Things got shut down right away. I was there a month, flew back home, and they said before I left, we'll be talking. We want you to come back. Anyways, go back, have a fantastic year. The players bought in. It kind of took me back to my roots of junior hockey. The Romanian, I know it sounds funny, but there's some good players in Romania. They just never been taught the game. And you're allowed you're allowed to play 6 imports, but you could have 10 on your roster if you want to just swap them in and out. So, there's a North American flavor to it. I knew some of the guys that were there, and it was the best year in their organization. We actually play in 2 leagues. There's a Hungarian league and a Romanian league. So in normal times, these guys play like 100 games a year with both leagues. And I'm going, this is crazy. So anyways, we finished in first place in the Hungarian league, finished in first place in the Romanian league, and we end up playing a team from Romania in the finals of the Hungarian league. So the Hungarians weren't very happy with us. They're going, oh, we're in a Hungarian league and you got 2 Romanian teams in the finals. So we lost in 6 games to them in the finals. We had beaten that same team at Christmas in the Romanian Cup, which is like it's just a round robin. You play each team once, top 2 teams go to the finals. We beat them in that. And then we had to play them again in the Romanian Championship, which was a best of 5. They were up 2-0 on us. Guys dug deep. We came back, won 3 straight, and won the national championship. And for them, it's like us putting on the Maple Leaf. The Romanian championship was huge for them as compared to the Hungarian league. They wanted to win it, but if you can win the Romanian championship, that's like winning the Stanley Cup.
I don't know if we've ever had somebody who coached in Romania on the podcast. So
I don't think I knew anybody that coached in Romania.
What is it like in Romania?
You know what? And I was glad I went in February. Getting back to the Austrian league, my GM wanted me to learn German and, be able to communicate in German. And the people spoke broken English, so you could get by. And there's no way this old brain was learning German. My wife tried for 7 years with Babbel and all these things, and she got to a point where she could actually carry on a decent conversation. I got to a point where I could understand words, and so I knew if they were talking about me or not. So then I go to Romania, and Romania is actually a very modern place. The place I was in, Brașov, is about 400,000 people. And there's an old Brașov, which is the city center, the old churches, things like that. New Brașov was where all the players stayed. The apartments are very modern, and everybody literally speaks English, and very good English. So I was very comfortable going there. And the only thing I missed was I didn't have a barbecue. So, in Austria, I was allowed to have a barbecue. Romania, I didn't.
How much did you have to adapt your coaching style?
Well, you know what? I've had to adapt since I've been doing it. I was a stubborn guy. I listened to Killer's interview with you guys, and I tell all my players at the start of the year, I'm loud. It doesn't mean I'm yelling at you. And some players could digest that, some players couldn't. And it was, over the years, if you don't adapt, you're not going to be in the business. And I feel very, very fortunate. I think this was my 28th year from when I was in Peterborough, being a head coach, and only with 5 organizations, basically. So I feel very fortunate. So I think I've done a decent job at it. Every year I sit down and go, okay, where did I make some mistakes? Where do I have to get better? And I'm still a little old school. I can still, be boisterous. I try not to get personal. But there's times where, I get in guys' faces, and then at the end of the night I go, why did I do that? So, it's a learning curve every year.
You, you mentioned his name, and that getting in people's faces and yelling at players doesn't sound like Killer at all.
Well, that line he used about playing right wing for him or left wing for them, he used that on me when I played for him.
What was it like as a player when you walk into the Ottawa 67s organization and there is Brian Kilrea?
Well, at that time, again, showing my age and everything, but I think Killer wasn't in it very long at that time. So it was a little intimidating. But like he said, and I'll agree, you were very comfortable walking in there because of the way they handled you before you even got there. You knew kind of what to expect and how to go about your business. And, it was the transition for me was actually pretty decent.
What was he like as a coach? Sorry, Frezzy.
You know what? I think I kind of, you take a little bit out of every coach you played for and things like that. And I think I took a lot out of him. he was hard, but you know what? He was fair. He was fair. He just wanted you to compete. And if you compete and you're, he uses the word honesty. And I think I've taken that from him to that, if you're honest with the players and you tell them, I kind of tell my players once in a while, you might not like what you hear, but it's going to be the truth. And that was Killer. He was fair. He would give you an opportunity. Actually, I went there as a defenseman and he changed me into a right winger. So, he gave me the opportunity to play there with a lot of really good players. And when I went back into that building and he was still coaching and I was coaching against him, that to me was fantastic. Like you look across there and it was like he didn't have a care in the world. I know he was prepared. I know he's a legend. He's a great coach, but hey, Mac, how you doing? Me before the game, after the game, hey, come on over for a beer. Like it was just like, game's over, it's done. Can't do anything about it. So, there's lots to take from him.
You talk about some of those great players you got to play with in Ottawa. And I know this is about your coaching career, but when you're there, not only playing for Killer, but Bobby Smith, arguably one of the best to ever come through the league. What do you remember about him at that time?
Well, he was just dominant. He was a dominant player. He had size, he had skill. And, I think his only year that I played with him, obviously I didn't play on the same line as him, but him and Gretzky were fighting it out for the scoring title that year. And, Bobby's a 19-year-old, and I think Gretzky was, 16 or 17 at the time. So, it was fun to watch and, how these guys prepared themselves. And everyone knew the thing about Bobby Smith was, if he didn't become an NHL hockey player, I believe he could have become a lawyer if he didn't get his law degree. He's so intelligent, and he was the captain of the hockey club. And as Bobby went, we went.
Were the bus rides really just cigar smoke and Anne Murray?
Pretty much. And a couple of cases of beer at the back for the veterans. So believe me, my rookie year, I got to know the veterans real well.
I love it. How did you end up in Sudbury after your time in Ottawa?
Well, it was, Killer might tell it a little different, but I had 2 years there, and they drafted Jimmy Fox, Yvon Joly, and I was a right winger, and I was going into my draft year, and I just didn't see me getting the opportunity to get enough ice time. So, Killer was good about it, outside of the fact that he probably traded me as far away from Woodstock that he could. But, I went to Sudbury, and talk about the star-studded lineup. I think like 9 or 10 of the guys off of that team ended up playing in the National Hockey League. So it was a great move for me. And, it was just one of those things that I felt I needed more ice time. My dad, I had talked to quite a bit. He had played a long time in the American Hockey League, and he just said, "Do what you have to do." So that's what we did.
One of those 9 or 10 guys from that Sudbury team that went on to the National Hockey League. Poper and I were chatting just before we came on today because we got to know about this guy as a teammate, and we also talked, Chris and I, about the fact that it might happen. We've been talking about Brian Kilrea. This guy might, as an OHL coach, we think it's certainly within the realm of possibility that he surpasses the amount of wins that Killer has.
Depends how many times they play the Rangers.
Yeah. Obviously, Mac talking about Dale Hunter, the Sudbury Wolf. What was he like then?
You know what? He was my centerman. Dale and I played, and I kid Dale, when we were coaching again, when I was in Sarnia and that, and he was starting out, and I always kid Dale that I put him in the National Hockey League. But you know what? He was a rat. He was, the way he played in the National Hockey League is exactly the way he played in the OHL. He came, I think he got traded up from Kitchener, but he was we call him shitbirds. He was just but we had a really tough guy, Bobby LeCun, on our left wing. So, Dale would start it. I'd kind of sneak in there a little bit, but Bobby would finish it up. So, but fantastic player. He was a year younger than me. We hung out a lot, obviously, because we played on the same line. And, to this day, I consider him a good friend.
He has a bit of a reputation of being a little crusty, it seems. Was he like that as a young man?
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't think any of us were. Like I think my crustiness as a coach came out way after I stopped playing. But no, you know what? And if you see Dale away from the game, like, again, we talk about going to Killer's office after a game in Ottawa. Anytime, whether I was in Erie or Sarnia or whatever, we were always welcome in his office after a game. And literally, it was hilarious because we do our TV stuff real quick, and we couldn't, it couldn't take us more than 5 minutes to get over to his office after we addressed the team, did the TV stuff. He's literally out of his dress clothes, into his sweatpants, got a beer sitting on the table, and then you just talk. You can talk hockey, you can talk whatever you want. And, so away from the game, he's a competitor. He was a competitor as a player. He's a competitor as a coach. He wants to win, just like we all do. And when it's game on, it's game on. But when the game's done, again, I keep referencing Killer. When the game's done, it's over. You can't do anything about it. So, we've had a lot of good times in Dale and Mark's office.
He's a damn good coach.
Oh, yes, one of the best.
You've done some winning yourself, not just Romanian championships, Mac. Let's go back to the first one in the Ontario Hockey League. And when I look back at that 96 Peterborough team, I see depth. I mean, behind the bench, maybe you saw something else, but it's a 35-win hockey club that goes to the Memorial Cup final. What made that team tick?
You know what? Obviously, Jeff did a great job putting, drafting the guys with his staff and everything and putting guys together. And we just clicked. Like my first year there in Peterborough, was Jeff's first year as a GM. My first year as a head coach in the OHL. I'd only been coaching for 4 years, I believe, in junior B and C before then. And, they gave me an opportunity. And, funny story about that first year, we only won 15 hockey games that first year because they had just gone to the Memorial Cup the year before, lost just about everybody. We win 50. Thank God Newmarket was in the league because they only won 13 games, I think. And we made the playoffs my first year. And there was a petition going around, fire MacQueen, doesn't know what he's doing. He's getting right out of junior B, blah, blah, blah. But you know what, Jeff and the ownership, they stuck with us, and he had some great drafts, and we kept those guys. And Jeff wasn't known to make a lot of trades. He knew what we needed as far as toughness or skill. And one of the things I learned not only from Jeff but other people when I'm building hockey clubs in Europe is character is as big, if not more important. Everyone knows you need skill, but you need those character. You need that leadership group, and we just had a bunch of guys that year that just love coming to the rink. And yeah, we were middle of the pack, but we used the memorial hosting of the Memorial Cup as hopefully motivation. And we didn't want to go in the back door because we were reading all the articles in the newspaper, and these guys don't deserve to host a Memorial Cup. They're not good enough. And we just kept reminding the guys we are good enough. And they were a close knit group. And it didn't matter if you're on the fourth line or the first line. No one cared who scored the goals, got the assists, as long as we got the job done.
What was it like in that city when you were hosting?
Well, it was crazy. It was, we had parades and, Peterborough was such a hockey town, or it still is. And you couldn't go anywhere without somebody stopping to talk to you. And matter of fact, it got so bad during the Memorial Cup. My assistant coach, Brian Drum, he had a farm. He lived in Coburg, so he traveled back and forth, but he had a farmhouse in Peterborough. And my wife had just, like, literally in game 5 of the finals against Guelph, just had our third child. So he says, you got to get away. You got to get out of this craziness in the city and, new baby and all. Go to the farmhouse. So I lived at this farmhouse for 10 days by myself because, it was mad. It was crazy mad. And they had a great setup in the parking lot with tents and, they'd show the game for people that couldn't get in. And, game 6, or not game 6, the semifinal game I'll never forget that game. It's the game that Sebastian Bach from Skid Row, his brother was the goalie, Zach Burke, comes out. And now you guys have been to Peterborough. Now, maybe it's changed a little bit now.
Nope, not really.
It's a pretty laid back, maybe an older fan base. And so you got this guy, Sebastian Bach, coming out on the red carpet, swinging his mic, and he's going to sing the anthem. And he doesn't even face the Queen. Is the old Queen still hanging at the end?
You know what?
No, I don't think it is.
She's gone.
Okay.
That's too bad. Yeah.
Yeah. But so he doesn't even face the Queen, which is the fans are going, what's going on? He turns around and faces his brother because he was our starting goalie. And literally, he sings it wasn't even rock and roll. It was, real hard metal, Oh Canada. And I'm looking around the stands, and it brought a laugh to my face. And the guys on the bench, it really loosened us up because the looks on the fans in the stands are like, how could he do this? Like, who is this guy? Anyways, it was a great way to start that semifinal game. And I think some of the fans were shocked, but at the end of the night we won and they were all happy.
We got to find that clip somewhere. It's got to be around somewhere.
I tell you what, it's one of the best, funniest moments of my career.
You mentioned his name a couple of times, Jeff. That would obviously be Tui. He was, I think, our second or third guest on this podcast, but a guy that you see in so many rinks. He's one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. And we talked about, obviously, his journey up through the ranks to general manager of the Peterborough Petes, and we know he loves the history so much. What was he like as a hockey mind?
Oh, he's one of the best. He just, student of the game, passion, you name it. He was definitely one of the best. And like I said, it was his first year starting as GM, but he'd been with the organization since he was a teenager going to school up in Sudbury. So, I relied on Jeff certainly my first year and all 3 years I was in Peterborough, just, bouncing things off him. But he wasn't an in-your-face guy. If he had something to say and had some suggestions, we would talk about it, but he wasn't micromanaging me at all, because he had enough on his plate. But to this day, Jeff and I are still good friends. We don't talk a lot, but we'll talk once or twice a year. And it's when you see somebody or talk to somebody you haven't seen for a long time, and the conversation just flows, there's something special there. So I've got a lot of admiration for Jeff and what he's done in his career. And I'm assuming he still wants to get back in it, which I can't believe hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure it will.
Sorry to jump all around. I use jump
I think
on
I'm
purpose.
jumping all around too.
No, that's all right. I use that expression on purpose because I want to jump back to Sudbury, where in your season there was a guy jumping, I think, over 60 times after he scored, I'm sure.
Hey, and Mac had 60 tucks too.
I know. That's and Foligno had, I think, 160 points that season. So
yeah.
How good was he?
Oh, well, you talk about dominant players like Bobby Smith at the junior level, and we weren't predicted to do anything in Sudbury that year. But I think you go back and look at that lineup, and Donnie Beaupre and net, and our defense was big and strong and mobile, and we had guys that could score, and we had enough tough guys. But Fligger was the ultimate pro. You knew he was going to play in the National Hockey League for many, many years, and end up coaching a little bit because he understood the game. And he just he could play any way he wanted. I think that's what made him effective. He could be that skilled guy that could take it from end to end, or he could be an in-your-face guy and drop his mitts. So he I don't remember him jumping a lot. Maybe I just kind of tuned that out after 60 times, but he I think he was the ultimate player because, like I say, he could play any way he wanted.
I got to ask one more on Peterborough, because anybody that we have on this podcast that played for either Peterborough or was a part of Peterborough or Oshawa, probably the best rivalry the league still has. What do you remember about games versus the Oshawa Generals and what they meant?
Oh, you talk about craziness. Like, people wouldn't care if you beat London or you beat Kitchener. Well, I shouldn't say they wouldn't care, but it wasn't high on their priority list. But if you lost to Oshawa, you might as well pack your bags and go home, because it was that much of a rivalry, and it was vicious. They were wars, and obviously this is back before they put in the fighting rules in the game. The standards of the calls have changed a little bit, and but you knew. I always said to our players, if you can play in Oshawa, you can play anywhere. And we had some great battles, and I think Stan Butler was the coach there in my first 2 years in Peterborough, and they always had good hockey clubs too, and they played in that small barn. I remember listening to one of your casts. You said, "Well, what do you consider a barn in the OHL?" Well, that was one, the old Oshawa barn. But they try and run the crap out of you and bury you in the first 10 minutes. But Jeff was smart enough to get guys like Sean Thornton and Matt Johnson, and so we weren't going to be intimidated. And they were great. When I say vicious, and they were a war, but it was good hockey. Like, it was passionate, and both cities, both teams bought into it.
Peterborough Pete's obviously the greatest player to ever play the game. That's where he played his junior career, Steve Yzerman. I had to. I'm sorry.
He tries to get one in every podcast. Yeah,
I was waiting.
Well, you mentioned Barnes, and I try to get this in every podcast. I think too. Do you have a good Windsor story? Because that barn saw some things, man.
Well, I don't know that I can really remember one as a coach, outside of the fact that the fans there were crazy. But as a player, you'd skate behind the net and in your end, and they'd be throwing pennies at you over the glass and dumping beer on you. And I'm going, wow, this is hockey. Like, come on. But, as a coach, I don't really remember. I don't think they were that good when we were playing them. So don't have a lot of great stories from Windsor, but the old Sarnia rink, when I first started coaching in Peterborough, Sarnia didn't have their new rink, and Mark Hunter was the coach in Sarnia at the time. and like they had no glass behind the bench, and the fans, like they'd reach over and actually grab you, and literally they'd be yelling and screaming at you. And I remember going in there, and it was in the finals the year that we went to the cup, and Sarnia they were loaded. They were better than us, but somehow we found a way they beat us, I think 11-1 or something in the first game, and I'm going, okay, then, like this isn't gonna work out real good. Then we came back next game and won a close one. But I remember going in there, and my assistant coach Sarnia, they would bury a quarter or a lucky dollar or something at center ice, and we found that out. So my assistant coach Brian Drum, I don't know if you know Drummy, but he was a big, strong, tough guy too. So I'm in the hallway down below before the game, and I go, "Where's Drummy?" And one of the players goes, "Oh, he's on the ice." I go, "What do you mean he's on the ice? He's out there with a stick trying to dig this coin out of center ice." And here comes Mark onto the bench on the other side. And I'm going, "Oh, this is going to be pretty." But none of that happened. And anyway, so yeah, the Sarnia rink, that was crazy. And speaking of people behind the bench, I can't not talk to two guys.
Pete DeBoer, yeah.
No. Pete and I had our battles. There's no question. I actually threw a water bottle at him once. I got suspended. He did, but no. I used to hate going into Kitchener. Love going in there because my family was close. People would come, watch, whatever. Great atmosphere, great rink, and great teams, obviously. But when we had bad teams, I hated going in there because there was this guy that sat behind the bench of the visitors. God rest his soul. I think he's passed away now. Anyways, he was ruthless. I mean, ruthless. And he would chirp and he would chirp. And I would engage him because I wanted him to stay off my players. Well, that didn't work. And he would have some great one-liners. And then one time I said, we had just won in Erie, I think in 2002. We're in there in 2003. We're not a very good team. And I looked at him and said, "Listen, talk to me when you win something," because they hadn't won anything then. Well, within a year or two, I think it might have been the very next year, he goes, "Dave, can I talk to you now? Because you had won." And I go, "Yeah, I guess so." So anyways, it's just some stories about some fans, and the Kitchener rink was always fun to go into.
I'm sure he deserved it, but why'd you throw the water bottle at Pete?
Well, again, he might remember it a little different, but we were in Erie, and it was exhibition, and he came with a short staff team, and I had a short staff team, meaning only probably 14, 15 skaters, and Pete and I used to talk before games. That everything was fine, and then once we get in the game, it's like game on, and there's no friends or no nothing. And I kind of said to him, "Hey Pete, what do you think? Like, let's just last exhibition game, get through the exhibition game, no shenanigans, And he goes, yeah, no problem." So I think I don't remember which guy it was for Kitchener, but it was one of their tough guys. Near the end of the game, goes after, I think it was Corey Pecker or Brad Boyce or somebody. And I go, "Seriously, like this just happened?" So I looked at him, and him and I had some great arguments through the glass and sometimes almost over the glass. I just looked at him, and I grabbed the water bottle, just a little one, and I just lobbed it over the glass at him. And he picked it up and he fired it back pretty good at me. So Branchy didn't like that too much and suspended me and didn't suspend Pete, but that's okay.
That's great.
That's terrific.
On the theme of heated coaches, when you went to Tampa Bay, there was a guy there named Terry Crisp. Did you ever see him get heated?
I didn't see him walk the boards or throw anything on the ice, but a funny story with Crispy is he came out. His son Jeff was our marketing guy in Peterborough the years that we were there, and Crispy was out of the playoffs, so he came up with him and his wife Sheila to watch the Memorial Cup. And I'm sitting in my office, and I don't know Terry at all. Jeff hadn't introduced me. In walks Terry Crisp into my office, just sits down, starts talking to me. I go, "Okay, just talked hockey. He says, what's your plans for tonight? How are you going to forecheck? What's your D's on? Like all this stuff. And so he leaves, and next day, same thing. Then he'd meet me and says, yeah, that was a good game, and all this stuff. So anyways, long story short there is he calls Jeff and says, do you think Dave's ready for the NHL? And I'd only been coaching 3 years as a head coach in the OHL. And Jeff goes, oh, yeah, he's ready. So Crispy calls me and says, you want to come to Tampa? And I go, well, yeah. Like, hello. And I said, but don't you want to interview me? And he goes, what do you think I was doing in your office every day when I was at the Memorial Cup? So anyways, once we got down there, he told me before I went, he said, Dave, he was in a little bit of a power struggle with Phil and Tony and the owners. And he said, we could be here 1 year. We could be here 10 years. I said, that's okay. It's great experience for me. And I really love it. And, he was as honest as they come with players. And, he had to, fudge a little truth once in a while to some of the guys that couldn't handle it. But first day at training camp, we're there, an hour and a half, a couple hours before we start. And he goes, got any drills? And I go, yeah. He says, well, good, because you're running practice. Really? Like, come on. He goes, hey, you're either going to sink or swim. And you know what? As it turned out, it was probably the best thing he could have done for me. And we had an older group there: Dino Cicerelli, Sean Burr, Brian Bradley. They were an older group, so they were really good to me. But Crispy, he was. I will say, it was like two different people. Game Crispy, away from the game Crispy. And like his shirts would be soaked during a game from sweat, and he was up and down the bench, and like he was engaged, and there wasn't anybody more prepared, to guarantee that. But again, away from the game, you wouldn't know it was the same person.
We hear a lot from guys that have played in those Sun Belt areas, right? LA, Florida, Tampa, etc. As the coach, you said you traded Peterborough for Tampa. Not a bad upgrade in terms of lifestyle, certainly climate. What's it like as a coach in that spot?
You know what? It's everyone thinks you're on the golf course all the time. I think Crispy and I maybe played golf 4 or 5 times tops. We were battling to try and get in the playoffs and everything. So, you don't feel that you should be on the golf course when you should be at the rink or at home working to try and find a way to win some hockey games. So I think we went down there, and when I say we, is my wife and 3 children under the age of 5. The hottest summer on record. We moved down in the first part of August, and the winter wasn't any better. It was hot, mild, humid. The kids wouldn't go outside to play. You'd literally go from your air conditioning house to your swimming pool in the backyard to your air conditioned car. It was so hot and muggy and everything. And, I give my wife a lot of credit for dealing with 3 kids under the age of 5, because in Tampa at that time, I think it's still the same way. We'd go on the road for 2.5 weeks at a time. Now, mind you, we'd be home for 2.5 weeks, but as a coach, you're not really home. So we'd be gone a lot, and it was really tough on her, because it was so hot, and dealing with, 3 young children. But, for me, I loved going to the rink in short sleeves and shorts, and I didn't have a fancy convertible like some of the players did, but I rolled the windows down.
You liked the weather so much in Tampa, you decided to go to Erie next.
You figured it's still south of the Canadian border, so what the hell, right?
Erie, PA sounds like a great spot.
Well, yeah. You know what? We loved Erie. We still have great friends there, that in non-COVID times, usually get together once or twice a year. But yeah, I got home. I still had a year and a half left on my contract in Tampa. And I was a little bit cocky. I go, I'll get a job. I got lots of time. Well, as the first year went by and my paychecks are still coming in, I'm going, okay, maybe I should start getting out there a little bit. We had a cottage down in Long Point, and instead of just hanging out at the beach and stuff. And, so I started going to some games in London. Actually, Gary Agnew, I think at the time, was a coach. So I knew Gary, and I called him up and said, could you give me a couple tickets? I don't have a job. And, so he'd always set me up. And I remember it like I was going into the last 2 weeks on my contract of getting paid, and heard that Paul Terrio was leaving Erie to go back home to Sarnia. And it was the only job left anywhere. So I called Sherry. I didn't know Sherry from a hole in the ground, except who he was. And they had a team in Erie. And fortunately for me, we hit it off, and he hired me, and we went down there. But it was touch and go. And I don't wait that long anymore. I kind of get back on the horse right away. And especially as you get up in age, it's a little more difficult to find those jobs. But no, Erie, and it reminded me a lot of Peterborough. They hadn't had much success. They were building through the draft. And my first year, I remember, we played before they renovated the rink, right beside the ballpark, which is still there. But our office, the coach's office, was in the baseball team's room. And then the dressing room was another room down the hall. And I remember, I'm going, okay, something's got to happen. My assistant coach was Peter Sidorkovich, and he was kind of filling me in on what's going on there the last few years. And we had like 3 older guys that walked into my office, and I knew they'd been out before, and the night before. And I questioned them, and fortunately they weren't great players. And I asked them, what'd you do last night? Oh, nothing. We're home watching a movie. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, grab your bag and get the F out of my office and get the F off my hockey club, because you were no longer an Erie Otter, because you just lied to me. And it kind of set the tone. I didn't know how Sherry would react, but it kind of set the tone. Thank God, like I said, it wasn't Brad Boyce, or I probably wouldn't have said that to Boise. But anyways, then we, that first year, it was okay. Second year, we won the Robertson Trophy, lost to Plymouth. We couldn't beat Plymouth to save our lives. Thank God, in our third year there, London beat Plymouth out in the first round. We played London in the second round. And then we went on to the Memorial Cup in Guelph that year. So, but we loved Erie, really did. But I'll tell you, and like I said, I've got family that are Americans. I've got very good friends that are Americans. But I'm at the gas station heading back across around through Buffalo over to Long Point at the end of the year, and pull up to get gas, and you can see the lake. The lake's right there. And some guy, I don't know where he's from. Obviously, he had American plates on, but doesn't really matter. He goes, oh, you're Canadian. I go, yeah. He goes, Ontario. I go, yeah. He goes, where is that? I go, well, you see that land on the other side of that lake? That would be Ontario. He goes, I often wondered what was over there. True story. Now, I don't know if the guy's been drinking or not, but, and like I said, I have some very, very good friends that are Americans and very intelligent people too. So, but it was a different world. It was a different world, but we loved it. And I'd spent a lot of my playing career in the States, so I was used to it.
That might be the best non-hockey OHL story we've had yet.
Yeah, that was perfect.
You talk about Erie, and I was curious about it too, because I've always found it a unique place to go to. Really, all the U.S. teams are, because it's a different vibe. Hockey is second to football on Friday nights. The high school football is big, all that stuff. But in your time in Erie, they were still just coming out of that infancy stage. They had the Glass Bangers there doing their thing. They Corey Pecker and the tradition when he would score. Like, I mean, the fan, and I remember Buck a Beer night and discount hot dog nights. It's just, what was it like in that atmosphere as a coach?
Oh, I talked earlier about going into Kitchener and the atmosphere in there with the way the rink was set up and everything. But I don't think I'd ever been, as a player, a coach, a fan, in a louder building than in Erie, because the stands were aluminum, the glass shook back and forth 10 feet either side, and the people, most of them were indulging way before the hockey game. Like, they would tailgate. That was, they're football people, right? So why not tailgate for hockey? And but yeah, and certainly as the years went on, the second year was better than the first year, and obviously the third year we were selling that building out. And I think for the final game against Barrie in that third year in 2002, the rink sold out in like 20 minutes. And so you got to imagine 6,000, people that maybe have had a couple pops already going in there. We got a chance to win the championship at our home rink, and you could not hear yourself think. And thank God the sex stores had sold out of these so-called Corey Pecker toys, because if 6,000 people were going to throw those on the ice if he scored, we were in trouble. But it was crazy, and the atmosphere, like I said, it was just fantastic. And like I said earlier, I'm loud. The players couldn't even hear me. It was that loud. And from the time we stepped on the ice for warm up until probably 2 hours after the game, it just never stopped. They're outside honking their horns, and you talk about, you're right. Like, the football teams get 10,000 people for high school football, and I remember driving to the rink in that third year when we had a chance to win, and people would be honking at me, and I'd look over and they'd roll down their window and say, "Good luck tonight, coach." So, I didn't even live in here. I lived about 20 minutes outside in a place called Northeast, but people started to recognize people. And then obviously, what Chris Knobloch did there and the 3 years he had, and it's a hockey town now. There's no question.
You played in a hockey town. You coached in, like, obviously you're coming from an Ottawa 67, one of the prestige clubs. And then, you're coaching in Peterborough. You're in the National League. And then all of a sudden you find yourself behind a bench in Erie. What is going through your mind the first time you saw a sex toy fly from, I need to ask, fly from the fans onto the ice? Because you hear the story and you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. But I want to know, as a coach who's been like Ottawa, Peterborough, the National League, dildos.
You know what? And I listened to you talking to Sanaya. Sanaya and I are very good friends. And I'm surprised she didn't go down that road, tell that story, because every time her and I talk, and she's been out here to Halifax to my place out here, and we had lunch, and every time we talk, we go back to that story. But, I don't think we knew what was going on, and then all of a sudden one of the players bring one back to the bench. And then it's like, oh, okay, Corey Pecker just scored. Now we got it. Okay. So the funny thing is, the players, like, they'd literally, there'd be hundreds of them on the ice when he scored, and he scored a lot. And and the players, or somebody would grab him and they take him into the dressing room after the game. So we go into Guelph for the Memorial Cup, and in the middle of the dressing room, there's this steel beam. And I walk in before the first game, and they're all posted on this steel beam. And I'm going, seriously? So needless to say, after the games were over, we had to get the trainer to go in there and hang towels and wrap towels around this beam because the TV cameras are coming in. But it was I think they even made T-shirts up with it, like Pecker Power, and literally we were told the stores had none left.
That's great.
It is. It's incredible stuff. We talked about Tui as the GM in Peterborough, and you mentioned his name, and of course he's been a guest on the podcast. We think actually he's still talking. We just stopped recording. But
he's a good storyteller.
he really is, and he's a gem of a human too. But Sherry Basson, as your executive, as you're coaching the Erie Otters, what was the relationship like?
You know what? It was great. It was great in the beginning, and as we know, like I said earlier, we all have shelf lives, and I get a little stubborn as my career goes on, and like I said, I've been very fortunate. You know, I left Peterborough on my own after 3 years. Obviously, got fired in Tampa. Was in Erie for 7. Was in Sarnia for 5. In Austria for 7 more at the same team. So, you know, you kind of get set in your ways. And that's one thing I've learned. When I went to Austria, I said to my wife, I said, you know, I've got to stop being an in-your-face guy when things aren't going the way you want them to go. And, you know, for 5 years, it was good. And then we didn't have a very good team in year 6 and 7. And, you know, I couldn't get them to win. I couldn't develop them at that point, and it was time to change. And Bass knew that. You know, we parted on good terms again. We met cordially after, had dinner together, and you know, I found Bass wasn't around. I think he alluded to it on your podcast. The last couple of years, he had a lot going on with his daughter. I also, you know, think he was in the running to buy the Buffalo Sabres at one point. So he had a lot going on, and you know, he wasn't around as much. When he was around the first 4 or 5 years, I'd be stupid not to listen to him and take his advice and everything. But he was like Jeff. He wasn't a micromanager. He let the coaches coach. He hired people to do their job. And if you did your job, you were fine. If you didn't do your job, he was going to tell you. And I'm okay with that. So, you know, I haven't talked to Bass for a long time when I went over to Austria. But, you know, like I said, we left on good terms, had dinner together. He just said, Dave, you know, we're not going to renew your contract. And I said, I know, it's time. It's time for me to move on. It's time for you guys to move on too. And, you know, that was kind of the way we left it. But, you know, in the beginning, when we were winning, he'd come down, like he'd be down there for almost every home game, and I'm going, holy mackerel! But it was funny. You know, I got to tell a Sherry Basson story because, you know, there was times when, you know, he couldn't make it down, snowstorms, what he was out scout, whatever, and then, you know, Peter and I would be sitting in our office, go, oh, there's Sherry, because he'd call every day. So we actually got a picture of Sherry and posted it on the back of our phone, so we knew who we were talking to every night. So because he just wasn't around as much when we were going through those bad years and out scouting, trying to find new players and everything. So, you know, we had a little bit of fun with that too.
So obviously you mentioned that your contract wasn't renewed in Erie. Then you go to Sarnia, and there's a player there your first season by the name of Steven Stamkos. What was it like coaching a kid like that?
I didn't have to coach him. You know, I'd like to say, you know, I put him in the National Hockey League, but you know, there was the thing that sets Stammer apart from a lot of guys is the quality of person he is. You would not, he, you know, first overall pick. I go in there, you know, Dino Cicerelli is one of the owners, you know, the Hockey Hall of Famer, you know, and here comes Stammer. He comes in with his family, and the politest people you ever want to meet in your life. And we're walking around the top of the rink and, you know, trying to, you know, give him the lay of the land. And, you know, there was no question he was coming to play for us. And then you just watch him play, and very, very coachable. If you told him something, he was coachable. There was no denial on his part, or no, you know, I'm too good for this or whatever. He was very coachable. Unfortunately, we knew he'd probably only be there for 2 years, which again, in junior hockey, you lose your first round pick after 2 years, then you're rebuilding again. And we seem to be rebuilding every year in Sarnia. So, but the 2 years with him, we actually made it out of the first round of the playoffs his second year, which that organization hadn't done up until that point. I don't know if they've done it since. So, but the type of person that Stammer is, when I got fired in Sarnia, my wife says, you know what, just get away, because I was pretty beat up. I was beat up and things didn't go real well. A lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, sort of thing. And my wife says, go down to Florida. Your sister's got a place down there, and call Stammer up, see if go to a game or whatever. And I get down there, call. You want a ticket, Mac? Yeah, that'd be great. Oh, thanks. Okay. The year before that, took my family down there at Christmas, because in the OHL you get those long breaks, and we drive down there. I call Stammer up, and he goes, how many? 5? Yep, no problem. We'll call. Like, he's just that type of guy that never forgot where he came from. Great upbringing from his parents, and I was fortunate that when they retired his jersey, they asked me to say a little thing on. I was in Austria at the time, and did a little thing with our TV guy over there and showed it on the screen. So that was a special moment for me to be part of that for him.
When you think back on the Ontario Hockey League, those junior days, the bus trips, the competitive, win. It's all about winning, right? You're measured by wins and losses. What's the grind like as a coach?
You know what? I think I was fortunate. I didn't mind the bus rides. We obviously being in Erie, we had some long trips, but Bass took care of us good. If everything was longer than 4 hours, we'd go the day before. It was very, very professionally run. Sarnia, unless we went east, our trips weren't that bad. But I have no problem sleeping anywhere. I can sleep in a chair, on a plane, on a bus. And I used to kind of like going on the bus because, my family was young, and I didn't get a lot of sleep sometimes when I was home, because I was trying to help my wife out. But so I didn't mind the bus trips, and in Austria and in Romania, like we go from Brasov to Budapest on a bus, and we travel at night. It's not a sleeper bus, although everyone's trying to sleep, because the roads in Romania for the first 100 kilometers are just single lane until you get into Hungary, when they're double lane. But it's still a long trip. It takes us 10 hours to get to Budapest. And I think you get used to it. I've never had a problem with the bus. Nowadays, before you used to have the TVs at the front of the bus, and you'd throw a VCR in, or a DVD and whatever, and boys would watch Slapshot and the old classics. But now everyone's got their own tablets and their own computers, and I just download shows. And since I've been in Europe, I do everything myself. I break down the games, I break down the videos, all that stuff. So I get to do a lot of work on the bus too. And a lot of the buses, not so much in Romania, but in Austria, they were double deckers. Players were up top, coaches were down low. We had a fridge down there, we had a coffee machine, we had the washroom, we had tables, back-to-back chairs. So it was very it was traveling in luxury over there. So buses are buses. I prefer to fly, but sometimes flying's not all cracked up to be either. You got to get to the airport 2 hours before. You sit around and do nothing. You get on the plane, then you get off the plane, and so there's pros and cons to it all.
I kind of miss, sorry, Chris, but those old days on the bus, Mac, when because there was an energy to it. There was a team sense to it when the movie was on for the entire bus. I kind of it's so quiet these days. I say to Poper sometimes, it's like, it's different. Maybe that's just me showing my age, but I kind of miss that.
No, you're bang on. You're bang on. Like it, but it's a generation now, right? It's what they do. They're on their phones all the time and on their computers all the time. And you're right. I do miss that too. That's a great point. because guys would be hooting and hollering at the movies, and you'd throw on. I remember in Peterborough the year we won, they'd be blasting the music after games, and so it was. And now, funny thing is, I can't remember who told me this. It might have been. I still watch a lot of the coaching symposiums online now, obviously, because you can't go. But one of the NHL coaches said, in his day, you used to get so mad after a loss. And nowadays, it's like 10 minutes after the game, these guys have forgotten all about it. And you're sitting at the front of the bus stewing about it. Might have been Ken Hitchcock. And he says, that's one of the things you got to learn to let go, because these guys aren't going to change. And literally, it's still the same. It's the way over there, too. I get on the bus and we just crap the bed, and I'm fuming, and I just want to wring somebody's neck. And I look back and they're on their phones, they're on their computers, they're laughing away, and I'm going, seriously? Like, but it's just the way they're built nowadays, I guess.
I like the olden days too, but I'm always on my phone, so I can't really say anything.
Well, you're in the media. You have to be on your phone.
That's exactly right. You mentioned that now over in Romania, you're doing all the heavy lifting, if you will, breaking down video and all that stuff. Do you still like that?
Oh yeah. What? It's great. And I'll be honest. Sometimes I got out of it a little bit when I had an assistant coach that took that over, and he'd do it. And obviously he'd show it to you, and you'd go over it at the end of the day and the end of the night, and try and pick out your clips and all that. But, I was by myself over in Romania this year. Obviously my wife couldn't travel over there. She could, but then she'd have to isolate when she came back. So we decided it was best that she didn't come over, and it gave me something to do. And especially my first year in the league, you have to get to know the league, because the Hungarian league, they've got a pretty good program there, and they've got some pretty good players. And probably out of the 7 teams in Hungary, 4 or 5 of them are pretty good. So it gave me a chance to get to know the players a little bit through video. And like I said earlier, literally my team, we had 12 guys on my team that play on the Romanian national team. Now that doesn't mean a lot, but they did move up to the division right below the big boys last year. So they've got to be able to play the game in the 1A, or I don't know how they categorize the World Championships. But, I had to do a lot of teaching this year, just on simple things, breakouts off of face-off wins. What are you going to do off face-off losses? Neutral zone, how to play above the puck, above the man, just things that North Americans are taught early on. Over there, it's like some guys just throw a puck on the ice and say, go get it. So, we were a pretty structured team this year, which I think helped us in the end. But, back to your original question, yeah, the video was huge for me. And, I'd go to practice in the morning, go home, have some lunch, do some video, have a little nap, nothing else to do, get up, do some more video, have dinner, watch a show, go to bed.
I miss game day naps. I can't believe I'm saying that, but honestly, like it's the ritual when we're on the road. Need the nap in the pregame.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm still doing it in quarantine here. Why not?
I woke up about 20 minutes before this podcast. I'm not gonna lie.
Nice.
Well, you did your hair good, so that's good.
Thanks, Mac. I appreciate that.
You described yourself earlier as boisterous. There's no question you've always been on the fiery side behind the bench. What's the angriest you can remember being at a referee?
Oh, you know what? I was thinking about it. When we talked about doing the podcast, I'm thinking, okay, I gotta have some stories here. Like, I just can't go on there and talk. And so I don't know if it was the angriest, but it might have been one of the funniest. I believe it was Tim Peel.
Okay, I was going to say, was it Joe Park? But anyway, I just like to pick on Joe.
Oh, you talk about Park, you talk about Hutch,
Sure.
All these guys. I'll get to that in a minute, but I'm in Sarnia, and Tim again, I hope I'm right that it was him, but you could ask Terry Doyle and Sarnia. He remembers it. Anyways, so something's going on, and I yelled something at him, and he's a rookie in the league, maybe his first game, second game, third, I don't know, first season for sure. Skates over to the bench and goes, "Steve, what's wrong?" I go, "Steve?" He goes, "Yeah, Steve, what's wrong?" I go, "You don't even know my effing name. Don't ever talk to me again." So that was that. But it seems like Sarnia had a lot. Seems like Sarnia had a lot of things, because I remember we were in there. I was with Erie. We're in there, and Sarnia was loaded the one year. They had a good team. They actually finished ahead of us. We beat them in the playoff round, but I remember grabbing the door on the bench and just slamming it. I bet you I slammed this thing 20 times, and it was hard. I'm surprised it didn't fall off its hinges, and I didn't get thrown out, which was amazing, because the Sarnia photographer, who I got to know once I coached there, he's standing in the belly, or in that area between the benches, just click, 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 click. My wife's got a photo album of me slamming this bench like it's in real time. But yeah, anyways, you know what? I think I don't know when it happened, because I was stupid on the bench sometimes. I wasn't a nice person, I guess, to the refs. And, eventually it got to a point, and Priz, I don't know if you remember Priz now.
Oh, gee. Prizzy, you could never get to talk when he was an official, but now you can't get him to shut up, Mac.
Oh, but Priz and I had it going a few times, and he'd skate by the bench and he'd tell me to F off, and I'd tell him to F off, and then it was done. It was over. And I think, they've done such a good job. Like, it's a tough job. And I always knew it was a tough job. I just didn't realize how tough it was. And the good refs, and there's a lot of them, and there's some not so good ones, but the good ones would try and get you disengaged from being upset. They would come over and talk to you, and you don't have an argument if you're not going to sit there and yell and scream at somebody if they're standing right by the bench. And I'd say, that was offside, or you missed that high stick, and he goes, "You're right, Dave, I missed it." Okay, so what do I say to that? Like, I can't say anything. I said, "Okay, then let's carry on." So the good ones would come over. Brad Beer was another guy. Him and I had our battles, but at the end he would come over and talk. And it's funny, because when my son was in Windsor and I was in between jobs, we'll call it, I'd go down to Windsor and watch the games, and I'd eventually make it over to Boogie and DJ's office for a beer after the game, but I'd always stop in and talk to the refs after, if I knew them. They'd be sitting in there, and some of them we developed pretty good rapport.
Throughout this hour-long conversation here, we've mentioned a ton of names. We've talked about Bobby Smith. We talked about Foligno, Hunter, Boyce. We haven't mentioned Cameron Mann, who was with you in Peterborough. We talked about Stammer. Who's the player over your time in the Ontario Hockey League that stands out to you, if I were to ask you, who is the best player you've seen, either played with or coached, in the Ontario Hockey League?
Wow. You know what? There's been a lot, and I would hate. I know how many followers you guys have.
3.
Maybe I was going to say 6, Pope, but I'll short sell it.
Well, we're talking to one of them right now, so 5.
Yeah, 5 others.
Right. Yeah. So I'd hate to miss anybody. There were so many. Like we talked about Bobby Smith, all the guys you just mentioned. But Cameron Mann was another guy, 27 goals in the playoffs that one year. Another guy that reminded me a lot of Stammer was Brad Boyce. I loved Brad Boyce. He was a leader, very, very well educated, very smart. Didn't need to play in the National Hockey League. Could have went on to do whatever he wanted to. So he was one of my favorites. But you know what I'm really a little bit more proud of, I guess, is the Sean Thorntons, the Matt Martins. Matt Martin was a walk-on in Sarnia. He was playing junior C down, I think, in Wallaceburg or someplace. Called Al Miller up and said, can I come for a tryout? And we had just lost somebody during training camp, or somebody wasn't going to show up. He says, yeah, come on. Well, we're sitting up there. This guy had no skill. Like, literally, I'm telling you, he literally had no skill, but he ran over everybody. And we kind of looked at each other and go, this guy's got to be on our team. And I tell you what, if you had said Sean Thornton and Matt Martin were going to play in the National Hockey League the first year I saw them both play, I'd say you got a better chance of playing in the National Hockey League. But they worked and they were so dedicated. They were in the gym all the time. And you know, I feel good that I had a small part of helping those guys realize their dreams, because, you know, those are the guys. We all know Steven Stamkos is going to play in the NHL. You all know Brad Boyce is going to play in the NHL, Bobby Smith, all these guys. But it's those guys, the underdogs, that nobody really realizes what they went through to get to where they're at.
We're getting to that point in the podcast where Chris just says, "Oh wait, one more, just one more." But before we get to his one more, there's a name I want to throw out here, but it's not from on the ice. But you've made reference to her a number of times. Newborn during the '96 run, 3 kids under 5 while you're in Tampa in that crazy hot summer. Couldn't make it over to Romania because of COVID this past year, but clearly been there with you the whole way. And that, of course, is Nancy. And the challenges, Mac, of doing what you do and having that support system at home.
Incredible. You know, I think we're going on. She's going to listen to this too.
Get it right.
It's either 32 or 33 years.
Attaboy.
And, you know, hey, we've had our ups and downs, no question. But I wouldn't be able to do what I've done without her support. She literally gave up her career to follow mine. You know, she had a great job in London at the Robarts School for the Blind. She's a child and youth worker, very passionate about kids. And, you know, we went to Peterborough. She got a job in Coburg at a group home. So, you know, for her to give up her career, raise our family a lot of times by herself, you know, like I said, I wouldn't be able to have done what I've done without her support and her encouragement and her kicking the ass once in a while to tell me, quit feeling sorry for yourself, go out and win a hockey game. You know, so, you know, she's very good with the mental part of the game. And literally I run a lot of things by her to this day. You know, I'm having trouble with somebody and she'll give me suggestions on how to deal with it. So yeah, it's, you know, we're very fortunate. We have 3 great children, very close family, probably because of all the traveling around we did. Kids weren't happy with us a few times, moving at the beginning of the summer, having no friends, but it sure bonded us real good. And I, like I say, I owe a lot to my wife, Nancy, and I'll give you a short, funny story, unless we've got to go.
Oh gosh.
So we're in quarantine here, right? And I think I can tell you guys in Ontario, the police, RCMP aren't going to come and get me. But so we're in quarantine and I'm on the 2nd floor, and she'll come by around 5:30, 6 o'clock every night for cocktail hour. And I lower down her glass of wine in a bag. And she has her lawn chair. I stand on my balcony. She sits in her chair because she can't be with me during quarantine unless she isolates with me for 2 weeks. And she actually works for a family right now. So she didn't want to do that. And I said, no, why would you? So we actually see each other a little bit. We haven't been able to hug or kiss or anything like that, but at least we get to see each other. And some of the neighbors kind of look at us like, okay, what's he lowering down this time? Is it a beer or a wine? Whatever. So yeah, it's worked. It's worked very well.
I don't even want to ask a question after that story. That's just
right. Come on.
like, come on here. That's adorable.
Cyrano de Bergerac on the balcony, lowering wine
Right?
down to his mistress. I tell you, that's great.
That's the softer, gentler side of Dave MacQueen.
I was gonna say,
Right.
where was this Mac when I knew you in the Come
You
on.
know what? It's funny. Back to a story in Erie. I used to go into the rock and roll station once a week on Monday mornings, and these guys were crazy, like literally crazy. And they'd do these skits with me, and one of them was the softer, gentler side of Dave MacQueen. They'd ask me questions. Is it this or is it this? I can't remember what they were, but and people, I was on the floor laughing myself, and people would listen to it and go, "Are you serious? The softer, gentler side of Dave MacQueen?"
Nobody knew it existed till now.
That's right.
That is
That's
great.
right. That's right.
But I will ask a question.
Okay.
Finally, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but 400 plus wins in the Ontario Hockey League. A king right now in Romania after that championship. Do you still want to get back into the Ontario Hockey League, or are you content with 400 plus wins?
You know what? I think I'm 3 games shy of 1,000 games. And that, I know you ask, how do you remember that? Well, somebody reminds me of that once in a while. And I think Sanaya said something the time when I did get fired in Sarnia that they couldn't have waited 3 more games, but yeah, I would love to come back to North America. I've actually probably applied for 95% of the junior jobs in Canada, but I also understand the dynamics. I actually talked to Mike McKenzie when they let the last coach go. I called him up right away. I was in between jobs out here, and he says, well, they were going to take their time, and everyone was telling me that he would probably take over. And I've talked to the Mooseheads every time they fire their coach, which is just about every year. But they go with the NHL guys and the younger guys. So I get that. I still think I have a lot to offer. If the opportunity ever became available, I would probably jump at it. I am very happy in Europe. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought I'd step outside my comfort zone. And believe me, going to Europe by myself was stepping outside my comfort zone. So yeah, now that I've been there, it's great people. The hockey is fantastic. It's always nice to win. Doesn't matter if it's the OHL or Romania. It's been since 2002. So I certainly enjoyed myself when we did win this year. And that, like I said, if the opportunity came up, I'd certainly look at it.
I know you said that you're in quarantine, so you got nothing better to do than talk to a couple of lug nuts like us, but you've been gracious with your time, Mac. It's a lot of fun catching up, and congrats again on the success, obviously, in Romania, and thanks so much for doing this with us.
Well, thanks, Mike, Chris. Thanks for having me on. I was looking forward to this the first time you messaged me, and it was a lot of fun.
All right, go drop that glass of wine. I'm sure Nancy's waiting.
She already had it. I had water. She had wine.